There is a lot of innovation happening right now in the food space, from alternative proteins to personalized nutrition to new food technologies to food waste reduction. But with all this innovation, there comes a reminder that innovation is more than just an idea, and that there are more factors at play that you need to consider. And these factors are what can determine if you're going to be a mainstream success or be left in the dust. Though the thing that could make the difference between those two options is just receiving a helping hand.
As we know, Canada is too big. Love Canada, too large. That makes collaboration really difficult. Because not only is our country so big, but the food sector is also really big.
That's Jamil Karim, Director of Communications for the Canadian Food Innovation Network, CFIN. He combines more than a decade of marketing and communication experience with a passion for helping people and companies tell their stories. Now he uses his background in communications and public relations to help connect and build the Canadian food and beverage ecosystem to help position Canada as a global leader in food innovation. CFIN is on a mission with its programs to help accelerate the food innovation performance of companies in Canada. They have awarded over $17.7 million to over 65 plus projects to help Canadian food innovation startups. So on this episode of the Food Growth Podcast, you will learn how CFIN is helping to support food innovation in Canada, Jamil's career story up until CFIN, why there is a need more than ever for communication professionals, how CFIN is helping you find a job in the food space, and some stories of some companies that are doing really cool things. So let's get into this conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I'm Jamil Karim, Director of Communications at the Canadian Food Innovation Network, or as we call it, CFIN. I was employee number 4 or 5 at CFIN, depending who you ask. I think I'm 5, to be honest. And I'm our first and currently only Director of Communications that we've had at CFIN. And at CFIN, I'm fortunate, I get to do a lot of really cool things, a little bit of everything, which if you know anything about the communications roles, that is what they are. So I have anything from like media relations, content creation, partnerships, events, Yodel, which we'll get to a little bit later, asset creation, like creating decks and one pages and stuff for our team, budget, social media, videos, you name it. We're fortunate that our comms department gets to work with every other department at CFIN pretty much every day. So never a dull day, and we're never bored, which is great.
Well, it's important that you have that segment within the association because, as this podcast is here to show, this industry needs some more communication about it, what's going on, because you can be within it in this industry and you're not even realizing about all the cool things that are happening across this country. So communications is a very important aspect to that.
Oh, I am biased, but I would say it's the most important aspect of it, but others will disagree, I'm sure.
Well, before we dive into more of CFIN, because we have a lot to talk about with that, I want to talk about you and talk about how you got into communications and really learn what this communications means. So maybe you could introduce, your story, maybe some key roles, how you got here. And I think it's pretty cool how you ended up at CFIN, even though your background might not be where people think it is. So please do that for us.
No, you got it. I like to think of my career path as 4 left turns to eventually just go straight.
Yeah.
I got out of university, and it's really funny. In my last semester at university, this is 2010, 2011, so I'm dating myself here, but Twitter had just come out. So we were learning about Twitter, which means the professor didn't really know what it was, but that's how old this is, like some of my education. Get out of school, and I started to intern at a startup news media publication where I got to write articles, I got to run the social media, and I even delivered the papers to some of our vendors in downtown Vancouver. So that was really cool. And then I went into PR, where I had some biotech clients, fintech clients. This is kind of where I started to get exposed to tech companies and the tech industry, which became a big part of my career. I worked at a coffee company for a while, which was just super random, but I was there for a couple of years. I worked in government organizations. And kind of the biggest thing I took before I came to CFIN, I was working at a PR firm. And if you've ever worked at a PR firm or any type of service provider, like a lawyer or an accountant or something like that, you kind of have to become a master at everything because you don't know what new client is going to show up on your desk the next day. I'd be working with clients who did standing desks. I worked with clients that had call center software. But I also had clients that were developing like therapeutic antibodies during COVID. So I kind of had a huge,
Wow.
wide spectrum of clients, which made me have to become kind of an expert on all of them. And that was going great. And then I saw this job at CFIN, and the timing ended up being rather fortuitous, I think, for both parties, because I was sort of in the market for a new job. I think I wanted something with a little more purpose and meat behind it. And CFIN had just kind of started, and they had this director of communications job posted. At the same time, we had these savage floods rip through British Columbia. In the Fraser Valley, specifically Abbotsford, the floods wiped out like farmland and crops. It was not great. And while it was happening, you know, it's one of those situations you see that on the news in other people's home, and you're like, oh, that sucks. I hope that doesn't happen here. When it happens an hour from your home, you're like, we have a problem. And you start to think about food security and how we're going to like deal with these seismic weather events that impact our ability to like feed people. So this is in my mind right as CFIN is becoming a thing, and it merged perfectly where I was really fortunate. We thought I was a good fit, and we've been rolling ever since.
Amazing. Wow. I totally understand. I think the wildfire situation, I remember a few years ago was in Australia, and you could see the smoke being affected in our airflow, and you're like, oh, that's in Australia. It's still a concern, but that's in Australia. And then happened here last year, and you're like, oh, this is at home. This is not a future problem. This is the current problem, and our food system has a role in with this. So I can see how this was the next step, and it could really start to open your eyes to that. And it's amazing that you can take you don't have to necessarily be in the sciences. You can be in the communication side, and you can still play a big role and help push things forward.
Absolutely. It sounds cheesy, but it does kind of take all of us here, and we'll get into this. I sort of feel like food is this last frontier of like innovation, and the urgency around bringing new ideas and new technologies to the food sector is ratcheting up through just the fact that we're adding obviously more people across the globe. Weather events are happening all over the globe, not just here.
Yep.
And there's this kind of gap where I feel like there isn't enough innovation being used yet in the food sector, which is where Stephen kind of comes in. But the urgency is now for more food innovation. And I thought that before I got the job, but now that I've become a pseudo expert on the industry, I'm realizing the urgency is even greater than I thought.
That's not a good thing to hear, but talking about the communication side. So I think a lot of people, including myself for a long time, just think now being in the social media age, that communication is, if you have a communication job, you are a marketer, you are doing social media. Would you be able to elaborate what is the sphere of communications? Like we can talk about your role specifically, as you alluded to the different things, but what is communications? What is that? What are you doing?
No, you got it. Basically, so I look at my examples coming from like the tech industry and moving here into like food tech and food innovation. It's taking complex ideas, projects, complex technologies, and simplifying it for people to understand. That is probably the number one thing a communicator has to do, especially when you're working with a little more complex topics, you know? So an example, we have a company that's CFIN funded that's using something called polypropylene in packaging. This is very cool. However, 98%, 99% of people don't know what that is or why it's important. This is where me and my team can come in. Like, we can talk about how it extends shelf life of products. We can talk about how it's biodegradable and reduces waste. It minimizes food waste. We can talk about how this new approach to packaging can scale and possibly become the new norm for larger companies. We talk about the market share, like, well, every country needs packaging. Could this be a Canadian solution that goes global into Europe and Asia? And that right there is the story. So the tech is being worked on by these great member companies we have, these tech companies, telling the story and the importance of why people should care and the potential of these technologies is really where like communications comes in. And it's such a key part of this. I feel like a communications job, I kind of consider it to be like a research job at the same time. It's because you kind of have to know everything. If I'm going to be talking about food innovation and talking about these companies, well, I can't really be a fraud, for lack of a better term. And
yeah, absolutely.
I kind of think of it. So when I came to CFIN, I had no food sector experience. So the team at CFIN liked me for all the other reasons, but we did identify that I had a bit of a gap here, which is kind of important.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Have you seen that Big Bird meme on the internet? Maybe there's a few, but there's one
There's probably a few.
sitting in a boardroom. All these people, men and women in suits, running a meeting. And then Big Bird sitting there, and Big Bird, like, yellow and sitting at the table. And I came my first week here, and everyone knew so much about the food sector because they all came from it.
Yes.
I'm like, I think I'm the Big Bird in this situation. And I was like, oh, this isn't good. So I spent first three to 4 months, I would work. And then after that, I would spend my evenings researching, reading papers, white papers, reading media articles, watching old clips of my CEO, and she would do like breakfast television and stuff like that. I had to become an expert and I had to do it yesterday. But this did give me confidence that like I can do this and anyone can kind of become an expert at this. And if you're going to be in communications and you're going to talk about the impact of some of your member companies or just the food sector in general, you've got to fully understand what it is you're dealing with. You got to understand the pain points of the manufacturers, what the challenges are, why these innovations are so important, why there's that urgency. So I feel the communications aspect is so important. You can tell the story is really cool, and you really you got to become an expert at it. And a lot of that research I really enjoy because I feel like I'm learning new things every day.
Yeah. Well, that's an exciting point to point out with the communication side is that there is this research, but it's an exciting thing. You get to learn. I mean, your job is to learn what this topic is and then communicate it in a way and transform it to something that can spread to the masses. So that is pretty cool.
It's very cool, actually. It's an underrated part of the job, but one of my favorites for sure.
It's good that you share that as well, because again, I think a lot of individuals might think, well, I like English, I like writing, I like that, and the jobs you might think of are just teacher, and then again, social media, marketing, which is communication. I'm not saying it isn't, but there's more aspects than just selling a product. So for in your case, it's really promoting this industry, promoting the technology, and the innovation is not moving forward right now. It's the changes in the small details when we think of how do I want to do this. So with innovation right now, we might want to deal with food waste, but you can't just say we need to compost. There's extra layers. Well, how are we going to compost from the manufacturing level? And maybe that involves taking food waste and transforming it into an ingredient. And that is an easy thing to understand, but the companies are into these very specific details of each thing, like you mentioned with the polypropylene, if I'm saying it correctly. So it's
you
really
got it better than I did, actually.
I might be the one who knows about it just because of my chemistry background, but I digress. It's good to know that there's communication roles, because one of the things when I speak to students at these networking events, they're like, well, what can I do in the food industry? And I'm telling you about the food science and all that. And I'll admit my background in the communication side and more of the arts, it's kind of lacking. So this is a good opportunity for me to share what you're doing.
No, it's an excellent way to kind of merge them. And I love your point there about there's a huge supply chain that in the food sector, we talk about the manufacturing, the composting at that level. You're right. There's so many levels. Once you leave the farm gate for the manufactured process, it's got to be transported, it's got to be sold, got to be consumed. Every step of that journey, there's room for innovation and new ideas, new technologies, So it's you don't necessarily think of it until you start to read about some of these projects. You hear about these companies, you're like, well, of course that would be a big problem, but you wouldn't think of it until it's really brought to your face,
Absolutely. And then as well, going to conferences, these aren't the conversations you have in your everyday life. You're not speaking, you might speak about again, food waste and composting at the home, but it's very rare that you're going to come and hear about the pain points of a manufacturing from your family. Like you just don't know about it.
No, and those are your family dinner conversations. Well, invite me next time and some better things to talk about at the dinner. Yeah.
That's true. Well, that brings us to now, let's talk about CFIN. We've kind of walked around that. So CFIN is doing amazing things. I've been very well aware of again, seems like you particularly everywhere, but of course CFIN's everywhere. You have been really become a force within the past year or so into really sharing about all the points about what the food industry is going through, what are some of the pain points, but also promoting innovation in Canada. I mean, Canada can be a little lacking with the innovation when you compare it to something like the States. And maybe if it's a lack of funding, maybe it's a lack of population. There's so many aspects. So how is CFIN helping to help people innovate?
No, I love the question. I get this one a lot, actually. So it's right in my wheelhouse here. So at CFIN, we have built the country's most active and fastest growing food business community. Right now, we're right around 4,500 food professionals. And that means manufacturers, processors, retailers, operators, distributors, tech companies, funders, service providers, food science, researchers. I'll stop there, but you gotta get the vibe. If you are in the food sector, you are represented in our community, and we're tacking on 30 to 40 new members a week. So this number continues to go, and we're pretty steady with this. So one of the best ways we're helping the food sector here is by creating this one-on-one community. As we know, Canada is too big. Love Canada.
Yep.
Too large. From where I am in BC to the other end of the country is like a day and a half, it feels like sometimes, and that makes collaboration really difficult. Because not only is our country so big, but the food sector is also really big. So if you're a manufacturer in BC and you need to collaborate maybe with a CPG company in Quebec, how are you doing that? If you're a retailer, if you're a packaging company in like Manitoba and you need to sell on like Nova Scotia grocery shelves, this is way too difficult to do on your own right now. This isn't really a Googleable thing. It's difficult. So our idea is to kind of take this whole country, take the food sector, and try to bring them together under one digital roof and make it easy for these people to find each other and find partners and connections. Sort of like a very curated and targeted, like LinkedIn sometimes, with how that works.
Yeah.
So the community is a big part of what we do. There's a few other things where members are getting from us. This is a free membership, mind you, too. So in addition to the network, funding is a big one. Startups need cash. Since it's, the tale is all the time and we get it, they need funding to pilot their innovations. They need funding to just clear an innovation hurdle or roadblock where they're stuck. But if we give them 100 grand and they can complete this over the hurdle and they're off to the races type deal. So funding is a big part of what we do. I want to say we're at around 70 Canadian food tech projects funded at around $20 million, somewhere in there, which is a great number for us. We're still adding more to that. And that's one across the country. It's amazing how many food tech companies that are in this country that are doing awesome things. Like I said, we funded 70 companies. Damn, I'm convinced we could have funded a whole lot more because there are so many great applications that we're getting in, so much we can do. But the funding is a big one. We also have 5 regional directors across the country. So no matter where you are, you have one of these directors in your region. They are super helpful. They help our members with funding applications. They help them find the partners and the collaborators I was talking about earlier. They're sort of that boots on the ground support, which is really cool because our whole organization is virtual, but these 5 are at all the events. If you think I'm everywhere, you got to meet these 5. They are everywhere, covered every single inch of this country. So they are super helpful, and our members get pretty close relationships with them. So they're great. Yodel, which I mentioned earlier, this is like our member exclusive platform. This thing can do a lot. Like you can find funding opportunities from outside of CFIN on here. You can use our resource finder to find co-packers or other manufacturers or partners. We have job postings. There's original content that we create. There's user-generated discussion posts from our members who are looking for help and support, and they're problem solving together on here. There's really a lot of cool things on Yodel, and me and my team are fortunate. We get to play on it, every day, for lack of a better term, but we just love getting to work on it and build it. And we're building it with our members in mind, what they want, what they need. So there's a lot of circle feedback there where they're telling us and we're implementing. And then the last really cool thing we do for our members to kind of help them out, we get them surprisingly a lot of media coverage. We have a pretty strong relationship with a lot of the media here across the country. So we always go to this media and we're like, if you need a source for a story, bother me. if they got 4,500 members, I can find you a very niche specific solution provider, or I can get you someone who's a huge food tech company that's, and everything in between. So we do a lot of that and try to connect our members to like cool opportunities so they get more just promotion and brand awareness. So you look at all of those different things, that all kind of comes in a free membership, which I think is really cool. And I think it's why we're able to add about 30 to 40 new members a week.
I'm not surprised at all. It's hard to believe. It feels like you've been around longer for how much work has gone into such a short period of time. And you mentioned the media. That has been, CFIN has started to become my go-to, just looking at food innovation, because it's on my feed. It's coming up. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that we were funding cellular agriculture in the Canada here. I didn't know about these companies, or here are the startups that are dealing with, what was the one that was recent that I thought was cool? There's been a lot of restaurant assistance as well, which I thought has been really cool.
Very cool. We one of them is a company called Real Life Robotics. They have like a robot kind of delivery. They use it for last mile delivery, but you see a lot of those in like restaurants too, where like instead of waiters, have robots kind of give you food and stuff like that. Robotics is restaurant tech, both very, very cool,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, I've been coming to you to look for robotics because it's been so strange that robotics is such a big role in the manufacturing industry, or it's becoming more prevalent, but actually learning about it has been harder than I would have expected. I mean, you look at robotics, you type it in YouTube and you're seeing these compilation videos of 50 different robotics, but you're not really hearing about the companies doing it or how they're coming in and implementing it, even though I know it's there. So seeing CFIN actually communicating it has been really helpful.
No, I appreciate that. Robotics is my go-to like food tech like genre, for so to speak, when I got to explain this to like my friends and my family, or when I'm at the dinner table, I guess, to describe this. Robotics is an easy one for people to understand. Like I always say, like we have a chain called Earl's here. Since I'm like I discover brands, I always use it. Basically, imagine you walk into Earl's, and instead of a human cooking the food for you, it's a robot. That's an easy one to think, because like you don't need a human anymore to like chop the cucumbers or chop the vegetables or to clean up the dishes. Robots can cook burgers for you. They can just cook not just one, they can probably do 4 at a time. Flip them, cook them perfectly every single time. Maybe turn off the grills once to save energy. So you have labor efficiency, time, consistency, energy savings. So that's a kind of an easy one. And we have a company called Gastronomist based out in Ontario that is working on this, which is why I'm kind of really familiar with this concept. But that's an easy one to kind of understand. It's not really chemistry based. It's just this robot's cooking your food, and you can kind of understand the rationale behind it. So I could talk robotics all day in the food sector. I love it.
I think that's a good thing that you are able to actually talk about it, because I think that is an upcoming job that young people might know about, but they might know about PLC programming and such, but seeing that they can go and do this job that actually makes a difference, because we think of software, coding for Spotify or going to Google or going to Facebook, but maybe we need more people that are able to think about how to transform manufacturing. And maybe, I think a lot of times, I was speaking of this week with a friend, is that I think that a lot of people go into tech, or they go into, when I talk about tech, I'm more so speaking to the music side, the Facebook side, the social media side, because you use it, you see it, you know what it is. But how many people have walked to a manufacturing plant and ever considered, how can I improve the efficiency of this, especially a high schooler? So unless you have worked for a little bit, you don't realize where these inefficiencies are happening.
Oh, I love that. You won't believe, this is the exact conversation I had with my fiance an hour ago. I was telling her on the podcast, and like, what's I'm going to talk about? She said the same thing. She's like, who comes out of school and like wants to go to a food manufacturing plant and start innovating? It's zero people. But when I look at the jobs of the future in the food sector, I kind of think they already are here. They're just in different industries, and they have not fully made their way into the food sector. I had this top of my head here, like a director of engineering, software developers, UX and UI developers, jobs involving machine learning, AI. You see those at fintech companies, you see those at clean tech companies, biotech companies, you see them everywhere. Well, the food industry has tech too, and those food tech companies need those same jobs. Like I mentioned, gastronomists, those end-of-arm robot companies, they need all those jobs. You know, I don't know if people come out and think, oh, I'm going to go work in the food tech sector. And another low-key gripe I have about this is I think like clean tech is amazing. We have awesome clean tech companies in this country, especially here in British Columbia. We punch way above our weight. I think food tech is part of that. It doesn't necessarily always is it seen as clean tech, but all of the projects, a vast majority of the projects that we find have strong sustainability angles where they're reducing food waste or they're upcycling, they're minimizing landfill waste, or like shelf life they're extending. These are all key sustainability initiatives that people may not realize that food tech is clean tech, you know? So I really believe that like food has got such great frontier for innovation and to bring in these new cool concepts. Like right, the auto sector, like they've had machines since before we were born, and yet there aren't nearly as many automated parts in like food service or other parts of the food sector. There's still a bit of a delay on some of this, you know? And so I think the future of food, a lot of these jobs, these people exist, these jobs exist. They just got to become more aware that those skills could also be used here in the food sector.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to dive more into that, but just quickly taking a step back, for those who might not know, what is clean tech?
Oh, right. So clean tech is so any kind of environmental green technology, something that kind of saves energy usage, water usage would be a great example. So there are a lot of, and I would say a lot of like food tech companies are clean tech because they're environmentally focused. You know, I talk about extending the shelf life of products. That's a clean tech sustainability initiative because we're not wasting and tossing out food and not throwing these in our landfills. You know, you're protecting the environment more with some of these innovations. So a kind of easy way to think about clean tech, if the innovation and the tech is helping green the planet or prevent fossil fuels or carbon emissions, that's clean tech.
That makes sense. Absolutely. And, you know, food is a part of agriculture, which is a part of the environment. And we use our resources. One that's, I know, becoming a bigger issue that maybe it's not being talked about as much is water usage and declining our use of water. We don't look at water as much in the way that we do energy pure consumption, but with I mean, in Canada, we have most of the water and the clean water in the world. So it's not as much of a thought, but when you come to other countries, that is definitely a thought. So
absolutely, water is a big one. We've even funded, I think, a couple of companies that are like repurposing wastewater, like waste streams and stuff like that. So you're seeing a lot of that kind of come to fruition. But it's a great point about water. No one really thinks of it the same way, but it's in there too, you know?
Yes. I know that there has been a few companies that have taken the water from cheese making and then being able to take the whey out of it and then repurpose it in some other type of thing, which I think is really cool.
No, love that. Any innovations around cheese, I have time for, no doubt.
Well, speaking to the jobs, one of the reasons why I also wanted to talk to you today is that CFIN has a career hub that is pretty new in that. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
No, appreciate it. Waiting for this tee up. Yeah, so we just launched our Food Innovation Career Hub about a month and change ago. And it's a one-stop shop for people looking to get into the food industry and for companies who are hiring in the food industry. So we have resources for both and communication resources for both. And this is for free, accessible through Yodel if you're a CFIN member. And the reason we created this hub, when we ask our members what their biggest challenges are, two of them come up. One is funding. Startups need cash, whatever this was.
Yep.
We get it. They need help. We will provide that. Pretty kind of straightforward relationship there. The talent doesn't really work the same way. We can't just go give $100,000 to you know, and that might solve some of the problem, but it doesn't solve how they go to find them, how do they retain the right candidates. And from the candidate perspective, how do they even know about these jobs to report? They're not really looking for them. So we realized those are the two big challenges. So the talent component is trying to be addressed here through the V1 of our career hub. And on this career hub, people can explore a variety of different resources. We have cool AI tools we found some really neat ones that help job seekers like tighten up their resume, write better cover letters, prep for interviews, where you kind of feed in the job description, and it'll like run an interview for you.
That's
It's
amazing.
very cool. Now, none of these things are around when we were getting jobs. No, we were
No.
that's really cool. I think it's kind of a funky way to kind of expose job seekers to what's out there from the AI perspective, and also to help them write their cover letters and resumes. You know, a director of engineering, I mean, writing a cover letter probably not their forte, probably the best way they're going to put their foot forward. This is very helpful for someone like that. We have job boards to make life easier. So we have a whole bunch of job boards on the website, food-centric job boards, for people to have like kind of like an aggregator in that sense.
Right.
On-demand videos on our YouTube channel. So we got a playlist for hiring companies, like tips on how to recruit, how to retain talent, all that. And then on the flip side, for like job seekers, how to make your resume stand out, how to nail your interview, how to get into, you know, those types of videos to help them with that. And then we have a lot of resources in the library. We link to a lot of other food-related programs that are around talent. Food and Beverage Ontario has a new one, a new talent program, so we link a lot to that. Food Grads podcast, we love a lot, so we always try to promote that. And then Food Grads into Lacey is helping us with our mentorship program, which is off to a rocket start right now. We got 10 pairs, 10 seasoned food sector like leaders, professionals, with 10 kind of people who are looking to get into the food sector. Some are fresh grads, some are trying to pivot and move into the food sector. It's the first time we run a program like this. So far, so good, actually. And this is just part of our initial effort to indoctrinate people in the food sector, kind of create a bridge, you know, and try to work on this. So and then also for companies, we have something called Funding Finder, where you put in information about your company and it can spit out relevant hiring grants for you, which so that's really cool. And then you have the daily discussion posts and articles. In the articles, we just try to like highlight really cool food and beverage, like post-secondary programs across the country, and where you can go, what you can get out of these, why you might want to take these classes. That sounds like a lot. Yeah,
it does. I mean, it definitely is a lot, but at the same time, you can tell that a lot of thought has been taken and put it into this ecosystem, because you can tell you're getting stuff. What does the employer side need? What does the job seeker side need? Okay, so what's the first thing you might think of? Okay, here's the education side. Well, where do I even want to go? Well, what would I look for? And then there's the, well, now I know where I want to go. I know generally, how do I get that job? And having those assisted tools, you know, and also that they're free, because for some individuals, the money side, just to have these access to technology, that is becoming, that is a big issue when it comes to tech, is that, as you've mentioned, access to funding. It's like you have the idea and you're ready for it, but actually having that. So also giving that assistance for job seekers, I'm really excited to share that one for the people that are listening right now.
No, yeah, it's really exciting. It's kind of our V1. We launched it a month ago, so we're getting feedback. If we realize, hey, these AI tools suck, okay, well, then we just get rid of them and we can find something better that's just going to go there instead. You know, like we're constantly looking to update this, evolve it, and do that in lockstep with our members. So we're not creating things that like aren't useful. But we got some really cool ideas for like enhancements to the Career Hub that are going to come in the future. But if you're listening to this and you have like feedback on the Career Hub, or you love it or you hate it, email me. I would love to hear any and all of this, because we're trying to make this the best tool it can possibly be.
Perfect. Yeah. When those that are listening, I'll make sure to link Jamil's information so you can easily find that in email, because he will definitely love to hear all the feedback. And it's nice that there actually is a feedback loop, because you're not just putting it out to the universe and just saying, here you go, I'm not listening. We think we're great. You're actually you're innovating your CFIN. That you're innovating CFIN over at the hub with the feedback.
You got it. It goes back to that whole being a communicator, sort of like being a researcher. It's that same kind of vibe here, you know, but this time the research is with our members instead of me kind of doing it on my own. But it's that same trying to get information, trying to learn, and trying to just make the best decisions for your members.
When it comes to learning for you, there's a lot of avenues that you can explore in picking up information, especially when it's startups, it's hubs. How does your process of research happen? Do you just say, I want to learn about this topic today, and then you just Google for 2 hours and then you write it down? And then how does your research process happen?
Oh, it happens so many different ways. So I'll do a handful of things. One, I am lucky to work at CFIN where 16 and 17 of our staff are all experts. You know, we got food scientists on here, we got trends experts, we got economists, we got brand builders. I need some help. I need to go research. I'm fortunate to have a really strong team. But let's say I can't, I don't want to bother my team, they're too busy. So I will go online and just research articles and read anything I can, usually from reputable sources. I'll try to pull something from either a food trade publication, something mainstream to kind of get moving on that. I subscribe to way too many newsletters. I just love getting information that way. I can read them whenever I want. Stuff like Food Dive, Grocery Dive. I read Food in Canada all the time, Canadian Grocer. Just kind of staying on top of all food related news. And then ChatGPT can be pretty helpful too. If you don't understand something, I don't know, some people might consider it cheating. I just consider it access to information, you know? Sometimes we'll like go back to the polypropylene, but the packaging. I gotta, okay, explain to me what this is. Why is it important? You know, try to get a better feel for what it is. Or just like explain to me why cellular agriculture is gonna be an important part of our food security in the future. And see what it says. You can start to, there's too many options available to, you know, through Google, to ChatGPT, through people, through networking groups, you know, through your own just creativity to find information. It's never been easier to research. You just got to invest the time to do it.
Yeah. I'm going to have to subscribe to some of those newsletters you've said. I started to, I think it's the Food Dive one that you mentioned on what are our members checking out, and you had that newsletter. And since then, it's what they have like this week, it was like 15 different startups that they were funding across the world. And I was like, wow, this is really cool and really interesting to know about how it's looking in different areas of the world. But the other point, oh no, my thought process just left me.
Happens to me all the time. Don't worry about that.
Oh, I was going to say about Perplexity AI. I really like, just to add into the conversation, the search engine Perplexity, just because it actually cites the sources that it comes from. So I really like that aspect. So they do have a free option. So, and I found the information more suited for the scientific field because they actually pull from Science Direct and they pull from abstracts. So just a recommendation.
Oh, that's a great one. I'm gonna start using that one too. That's sweet.
Yeah, it's not as long as, they're very short, like 2 or 3 paragraphs, not as long as ChatGPT, but I definitely like it for the source pulling. And I love having references because I have, ChatGPT is a good place to start with the overall ideas, but sometimes when you dive too deep into the science, you're like, that's not quite right. But anyways,
GPT can take you from like a 0 to a 6.
Yes.
But if you want to get into like an 8 or 9 and be detailed and sourced, you need to then leave ChatGPT. It's sort of like your launching point, but in order to get that to a 10, you got to go look at it.
That's a really good thing. As you have been in CFIN, and we've been kind of talking about different things, what are some of the major themes or projects that you're seeing that you're kind of excited about coming forward with the Canadians and their innovation?
Man, I could talk about this one for an hour, so I'm going to try to keep it tight. We talked about robotics, so I won't dig into that. Yeah, cellular agriculture is a super cool one. And I'll be honest, I didn't know a ton about cell ag before coming here. And then just last year, me and my team helped produce a documentary on cellular foods. So life comes at me fast, you know? But that is a very, very cool and nascent industry. It's really emerging, but just getting FDA approvals now across like the US. And step back, cellular agriculture, sort of growing food in labs. You take cells off of animals non-invasively, you put them into a bioreactor, they replicate, and then that allows you to get like steak that can be like made in the lab, or like salmon or other types of fish. So there's a really cool and emerging industry here, and this is not going to replace traditional agriculture. It's just not. You just got to look at this from how can we add to our food supply, sustainably add to the food supply, because if we are reliant on traditional processes, then we are at risk from, you know, like we talked about, like some of those weather patterns that can really disrupt your food supply. So we see this as an and solution. Like this could help, and cellular agriculture reduces a significant amount of environmental waste, especially from transportation and the manufacturing of the food. Uh, you could set these things up kind of anywhere. A farm, you need farmland, where a like bioreactor, you need a space a bit bigger than I'm in, but you can put those a little more locally. So I think cell ag is very cool. It's very new, and we have a ton of content on CFIN, on Yodel, and on our YouTube channel about this. Upcycling and food waste is a big one. Food waste is just a pervasive problem. Like I always just think like, you go to a restaurant, I'm sitting there, I'm like, 3/4 of the people finish their meal, maybe less.
Yeah.
How much food is being wasted is just in this one restaurant at this one time. I just think about, and then you start to extrapolate that to all over the world. And it's a really hard one to get a handle on, food waste. There's a lot of components to it, but the idea of like reusing wastewater, or like, waste streams into value added products is very cool. Or taking like unused produce and repurposing it into like powders that can be used in smoothies or value added ingredients. Just try to create that circular economy. I think it's very cool, and also kind of easy to explain for people to understand.
Yeah.
And then packaging, we've talked about a decent amount so far, but I just think there's a lot of cool innovations around packaging. It is a little more difficult to just implement than you would think. Because again, we talked about the supply chain, how far back you need to go, and all the parties kind of need to be aligned. But there's a lot of really cool opportunities in packaging that I think you'll start to see coming forward and start to commercialize over the next few years. So your grocery store may look a little bit different.
I'm excited to see more changes with everything. And like we talked about earlier in the conversation, we have these major themes, but it's actually implementing it that starts to really get down in the nitty gritty, that I think sometimes there's that resistance to. It's, for example, I've recently been thinking, well, I want to compost. I live in an apartment building, but they don't have compost in my building, and they do not accept it. So I'm like, well, what's my next option? And I've been really looking at it. I'm like, I could bag up all my compost and I can go take it to the garbage bin, or sorry, to the garbage site in order to compost it there. And then I looked, I'm like, oh, now there is a one that you can have on your counter where it does some science inside of it, breaks it down. Yeah, Lomi, that's the one. And then I think even just recently, one of your members on Yodel had posted, they have these cedar boxes, and then you can get a starter kit of worms, and then you can put your compost in there. And I was like, oh, I've never thought about doing that. I'm like, would it smell? And I'm looking into it, and there's just these such specific problems that are impeding you. So you might have the intention of wanting to do it. When your factory is trying to, from the manufacturing level, you're just trying to get the product out. You're tight on labor. You want to innovate. You want to be more sustainable with your practices, but bringing it in, it's a little too much work. So having those startups or those organizations, if they can figure out how to really just come right in there, slide in and be like, just flip a switch and now you can implement it. That's really what's going to start driving the changes, because there's that implementation stage that can be really difficult.
Oh, you've hit it perfectly. I also love how much you want to compost. Most people give up after the first thing you mentioned there, where your apartment building.
Well, I haven't started yet.
Yeah, but the fact that you've even looked at other options and alternatives is so unique. It's, if you have to make people work harder, or you make something inefficient for them, it's not a solution that can scale, and it's not a solution that will, and that's, if it's a key factor, what it is, you can't put the onus on the person to jump through 3 hoops to compost them. That is never going to solve anything. And there are good intentions. I don't know why I thought about this. You never go to like a food court at a mall, and you got your train, you go to like the garbage area, and you got like, every single person goes there, is like, I don't know where this goes. I think this might be compost. I think this is this. Eventually people are like, forget this, and I'm just going to go dump it. Good intention, it's still, that doesn't even work, and you were trying to pre-sort it on site. Solutions can be very difficult to find for this, because they got to check so many boxes to really work. But your point is bang on. It can't be too difficult for the person. You can't put them through hoops to do it, or else it's never really going to work.
Have you seen any success with any organizations that have gone through CFIN, or seen like a good scale up that since you've started there?
Oh yeah, lots. I can think of. We mentioned Gastronomist. Relocalize is a very cool company. They're based out of Quebec. They have a like micro manufacturing facility where they produce like on-demand ice. Like so they basically
Oh,
set
okay.
up a micro like on-site at a grocery retailer. And their micro factory can produce ice and they give it directly to the retailer. Because the transportation there in Quebec, there is like one ice like hub distributor. So the
Uh-huh.
trucks come in, get the ice, and then take them out to the retailers to sell. It is incredibly inefficient to do it this way. And also, water, like, it's not really meant to be sitting in the back of trucks driving across
No.
2.5 hours. So with ice, they're using ice as their proof of concept, but they are basically like going hyper local, on site, producing in this mini manufacturing facility,
Yes.
packaging up the ice. You're completely removing all of like the middle mile logistics here going from it. And they're a really cool company. They were in Forbes not that long ago. We've given them some funding. We have a really cool video about Relocalize on our YouTube channel. It's like 2 minutes long, but it explains exactly what they do and why they're doing it. But there's a company that I'm just a huge fan of. The guys are great. We see them a decent amount of the time. If you're looking for a really cool food tech company that's really on the up and up, Relocalize is one I think is very cool.
That is so cool. As we're sitting here, that is not something, as you say, it makes perfect sense that this is an issue, but I've never thought about it. I've never thought about this.
Oh my God. And not only never think about it, then once you start to learn about it, you start to realize all the red flags we have in our current process, you know? So they are, and ICE is their current like proof of concept type deal here where they're working on it.
Mhm.
I think what they're doing could be applicable for some other products as well, not just ICE. So I'm really curious to see how they scale and grow over the years, but they're gonna be a really fun one to watch.
Okay, well, I have to just move on with that. Is there another? Blow my mind with another one.
Oh, another really good one. Food cycle science is another cool one. They have like a one bid system for like composting that can convert your compost into like a soil amendment that can be upcycled and then reused. So they're a very cool company, sort of into your wheelhouse there, trying to
Yeah.
compost a bit better. They're based out of Ottawa, I want to say.
Okay.
I'm going to butcher this a little bit, but we can dig into this. They have an agreement with the city of Nelson, BC, where I think they have their one bin like compost system in every home in Nelson or a bunch of businesses there. They have an agreement with
Mhm.
the city to help the city compost better and reduce their carbon footprint,
Wow.
which I thought was super cool. Well, not only because I'm from
Yeah.
BC and this is up the street for me and these guys have an
Yeah.
agreement, but to see a municipal government take action like that and go with a Canadian company that we funded that we know to do this. I thought it was really cool. They're
Yeah.
scaling, they got strong revenues. Food Cycle Science is a very cool company and sort of near neck of the woods ish in Ontario.
I think they must be, I swear they must be doing it for another municipality, because as I was researching my compost things this week, there was, I think, somewhere like Bradford or somewhere in Lower Ontario, they're planning on doing that as well, because it's sad that just municipal composting isn't working. I mean, it was kind of on the news recently that someone was just showing that there was a picture of someone just taking the trash from Toronto and taking the recycling bin, combining it and just throwing it, and you're just like, oh, why did I spend my time to even think about this when it doesn't really matter,
That's it. And you see things like that. And not only is it demoralizing in the present, it
Mhm.
impacts your decisions in the future when you see things like that. And that just continually sets us back, you know? And
Mhm.
from the business angle of it, you get clients like municipal governments coming in, you're in a good position, especially if you have a strong proof of concept case study with the city of Nelson. So I really hope Food Cycle Science blows up and becomes the
Mhm.
biggest success story on the planet because their team is really great, just like Relocalize. And
Yeah.
obviously, we've invested in them because we think they're a great company.
I'll definitely be keeping tabs on them. In terms of just taking a step back and just thinking of our audience, so we talk about the whole how CFIN can help with the Career Hub, how you're sharing about the different amazing organizations that are doing different things in that, but just thinking about maybe the students that are wanting to make a difference in the food industry. They want to innovate, but they don't really know where they should start. What would be your advice for someone to, you just informed me about some crazy ideas that I never even was aware of.
Yeah.
So taking a step back, what advice would you give to maybe students that are looking to, innovate Canada's food industry, but they don't know where to start, or maybe general advice?
Yeah, a couple things there. So if you're a tech company and you're early stage, obviously CFIN can help you, but we aren't the only solution. There are tech accelerators, incubators all over the country. Connect into these local communities where you're from. If you're from BC, I can give you the name of about 15 different tech accelerators. Hundreds of mentors here in this province are looking to help young startups. There are resources available for you. Look into them; those are there. If if you're new to the food industry, you're not really starting a company, but you're not sure how you fit in, totally fine. As I mentioned, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I took 4 left turns and kind of just fell into this job sort of in perfect timing, and now I'm in love with it. So it will just come to you. But during that time, while I was taking all those wrong turns, I did a lot to try to position myself to eventually go straight. Some really good tips that I would suggest: one, volunteer. That's just your time. And if you're early in your career, you have the time to do this. I'm sure of it. I would go volunteer to work registration tables at tech events, just so I could meet
Oh,
every single person that came in. I would know what their names were, help me kind of remember people. And I found it to be very helpful. You do this a handful of times, start to recognize people. Sort of an easy way to network, by just sitting there and they got to come to you. So I did a lot of that when I was younger. I used to mentor uh, back when I was as well. That was really helpful to try to just build my network and stay current and relevant with what's happening, with students coming out. So being part of mentorship programs, either you connecting with a mentor or you mentoring someone else, I really recommend. Another thing that was like critical for me to help like professionalize my
uh-huh.
situation is I volunteered to sit on the board of directors at my local community center. So we run a
Okay.
ton of programs at this community center. We got a gym, we got like time for tots, preschool programs, birthday parties, you name it. I did this so I want to experience being on the board. I thought that'd be very helpful for me. I got to run my own marketing communications committee where I was running a lot of key decisions for the center, which was really cool for me at the time. I then worked my way up to the executive, and I became the president for 2 years. So I got to see this all the way through, and I'm still on the board now. But this was really helpful for me. Well, A, for the job I have, I think the fact that I was the president of this board was helpful for me. I work with the board like now, so I have a better understanding as to what it is they're doing and their processes and how long things take. And I had like people underneath me. I was making big decisions. Like during COVID, we had situations that we're going to shut this down, how we're going to handle the staff payments. Like I got all of that experience because I was
Wow.
the president of the board, and that all helped shape me to kind of get me where I am now. This was my own time investment, no money, but just doing this to get the experience and the time, and it was super helpful. So if you're new to the industry, you're getting out of school, these are really good things I need to do to build your network, because your network is key. It absolutely who you know, and I'm not talking about like people you're connected with on LinkedIn. That's
Yeah.
not that is sort of a network. Human beings that that you could get a beer with. That is a network, and building that, it takes time and commitment to want to do it. But I think it's kind of fun because not only do you get to meet new people, as mentioned, you might get a couple of beers out of it too.
Can't shake that. I love that. And as well, speaking to our whole conversation, you're helping your local community, and
Got it.
that makes a better community for you to live in. And that hopefully can in turn empower other individuals to do other things, and just like this nice cycle. That's a good one. And that's really accessible one for those who might not know if they even want to go into the food industry, even though I highly recommend it. It's great, but maybe you don't know about that. And it helps you look into the decision making process, as you mentioned, because so I've learned as I've gotten more involved with food grads and such that being on the school side, I just got the academics, got that, but now being on the other side and just being in these conversations, you realize, oh, this is how a decision's made, this is like how, and these are going to affect your job, and these are things that you're going to be doing if you plan to push forward.
You got it. That's exactly it. Time is on your side when you are a new grad. You are not married yet. You do not have kids. Your job is not like taking all of your energy. You got some. Use it. This is a like opportune time for you to volunteer, grow your network, and get out there. Like take advantage of it for sure.
I love that. And I think that is a good place to end our conversation, even though I could definitely speak about all these other cool startups that are doing amazing things and dive more into your background, Jamil. But I'll leave it there just for our listeners' sake. So before I let you go, where can people find you?
No, love that. Email me. My email address will probably be in the description here. It's on the CFIN website. I'd love to hear from you. If you just email me, I will get back to you. I'll make time for you. I mentioned Yodel. I'm on there a decent amount. You can find me and become a CFIN member because not only will you get access to me, but 4,500 better people to meet that you'll get access to that may be able to help your career in the food sector. So I highly recommend that. And if you have any questions about my career or CFIN, slide into my inbox.
I love that. I'll make sure to share all those, and I'll second everything that you've said, Jamil, because I've been involved with CFIN, looking at Yodel and all. You're doing amazing work, and I'm so happy that we were able to have this conversation and share that with others. So once again, thanks so much, Jamil, for coming on the show.
Appreciate it, Veronica. Have a good one.
After speaking with Jamil, I'm excited about what the future of food could look like. So many cool innovations are happening right now in Canada, and I need to do some research to learn more about them because I'm missing out. If you want to learn more about CFIN, sign up for their membership, or learn more about Jamil, then check out the description of this podcast. I also recommend that you check out episode 73 of the podcast for my interview with Michelle Brizois on defining and cultivating innovation, because she's also part of the CFIN family. So as always, everyone, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.